8 things the pieces can do that almost nobody uses, and the last one refuses a queen. Start with the only check in chess you cannot block. Every other piece checks you along a line. Queen, rook, bishop. A line has squares in between, and squares in between mean you can throw something in the way. A knight has no line. It just arrives. So when a knight checks you, there are exactly 2 legal answers on the board. Move the king, or take the knight. That single fact is why the ugliest mate in chess exists. New York, 1946. Edward Lasker against Israel Horowitz, and the game lasts 14 moves. Nothing strange happens. Pawns come off in the center, a knight goes to b5, black wins the piece back. Then black checks with the queen on e5. He blocks with his knight to e2. It is the natural move. It is also the last one he gets. Knight to d3. Mate. Now count the squares around the white king on e1. 5 of them, and white's own pieces stand on all 5. Queen, bishop, 2 knights, a pawn. Nothing can capture on d3, and nothing can block, because a knight check has nothing to block. The pattern is called Philidor's Legacy, and Philidor did not invent it. It is written down in a Spanish book from 1497, roughly 250 years before he was born. Next one costs nothing to learn and wins pawn endings for the rest of your life. A pawn can move 2 squares on its first move. Everybody knows that. Almost nobody knows what it is worth. Here is a king and a pawn on an empty board. White has a pawn on h2 and a king stuck in the far corner, doing nothing for the entire example. Black has a king on b4. Play h4, the double step. Black runs. King to c5, king to d6, king to e7, king to f8, and white queens with check on move 5. Black is a full move short. Now rewind and play h3 instead. Same board, same pieces, 1 square less. Black runs the same way, and this time he arrives, sits down on h8, and the game is a dead draw. He cannot be evicted from that corner by a king and a rook's pawn. The table base gives 1 word for each version. Win. Draw. That is what the first move is worth. Not a square, a move. And a pawn ending is nothing but a counting problem where 1 move is the entire margin. So when you are pushing a passed pawn and you have already touched it, understand what you spent. Now a rule almost every club player has wrong. You know you cannot castle out of check, and you cannot castle through check. Both true, and both are about the king. Nobody tells you the rook is under no such rule. The rook is allowed to be attacked while you castle. The rook is allowed to cross a square that is attacked while you castle. Only the king's 3 squares matter. Take the sharpest castling position in chess, the Sicilian dragon, Yugoslav attack. White builds bishop e3, f3, queen d2, bishop c4, and on move 10 he castles queenside, straight into the teeth of a black attack. Watch what would happen if black's rook were sitting on b8 with the b file open, aiming at b1. The rook on a1 would travel across b1, an attacked square, and land on d1. Perfectly legal. You can castle. Move that black rook 1 file across to c8, and now it hits c1, which is a square the king crosses. Illegal. Move it to d8, hitting d1 where the king lands. Illegal. And if the black rook attacks a1 directly, the rook you are about to move, castling is still legal. 3 squares belong to the king. The rook takes fire for free. 2 bishops next, and the fact that decides whether an endgame is a win or a handshake. Put a bare king in the corner. Give the attacker a king and 2 knights. The knights come in, knight to c3, knight to d3, e4, f4, g5, h5, e6. 7 knight moves. The black king shuffling between g8 and h8 the whole time, and there is no mate at the end of it. The defender is not doing anything clever. 2 knights and a king cannot force checkmate against a lone king. Ever. Now, take those same 2 knights off b1 and c1 and put 2 bishops on exactly the same squares. King to g6. Bishop to h6. Bishop g7 with check. Bishop a2. Mate in 4. Same squares, same king, same corner. One piece type separates a forced win from an unwinnable position. The reason is color, and it is not a technicality. A two-knight mate exists on the board. It just cannot be forced, because the instant you take the defender's last square away, he has no legal move at all, and that is stalemate. Two bishops never run into that. One owns the light squares, one owns the dark, permanently, and together they can squeeze without ever squeezing everything. That is what the bishop pair actually is, and it is why you think twice before trading one off. Here is one you can check yourself in 10 seconds. Black king in the middle of an empty board. White has two rooks and a king, and the white king is going to stand on e1 and never move again for the rest of the example. Rook a5 with check, king f6, rook h5, king g7, rook a5, king h8, rook a7, king g8, rook d7, king h8, rook b8, mate. 6 moves. The white king took part in nothing. Two rooks cut the board in half and then shrink it, one rank at a time, and the king is not required. Now replace both rooks with a queen, the piece everybody calls the strongest on the board, and freeze the white king on e1 again. There is no mate, not in 6 moves, not in 15. The queen cannot do it alone. She is worth 9 points, and she cannot finish a game without help. 2 rooks are worth 10, and they do it with the king asleep in the corner. The king now, and the strangest way to win a chess game. White king on e5, white pawn on e4. Black king on e7, standing directly opposite, 1 square of air between them. Whoever has to move here is the one who loses the argument. If it is white to move, the white king has to step aside, black takes the square in front of the pawn, and the position is a draw. Exactly a draw, verified. If it is black to move, black has to step aside, white's king walks in front of his own pawn, and white wins. Same board, same material, same everything. That is opposition, and it is the closest thing chess has to a piece attacking by standing still. Your king never captures anything and never gives check. He stands 1 square away, takes 3 squares off the other king, and then hands him the move back. The other king runs out of places to go and has to let you through. Which means the strongest king move in an endgame is very often the one where your king goes backwards, or sideways, and waits. The queen's turn, and her superpower is not winning. Anybody can win with a queen. What only a queen does reliably is refuse to lose. Perpetual check. You are down a rook, a piece, an army, and none of it matters, because the enemy king cannot get away from a queen that keeps checking. Draw, and your opponent has to shake your hand. Vienna, 1872. Karl Hampe against Philipp Meitner. They call it the immortal draw. Black gives up a bishop on move 3 to drag the white king out to f2. Then a queen check, another queen check, and the king is walking. e3, d3, c3, b3. On move 9, black hands over the queen 2. Knight check, pawn check. The white king is now on c5, on the 5th rank, in the middle of the board, on move 12. He gives back both knights 2, and ends up with 1 bishop and 3 pawns against a full army. Bishop b7, check. King b5. Bishop a6, check. King c6. Bishop b7, check. Draw. Black had 1 bishop and no queen at all, which is the whole joke. Meitner did with a bishop what the queen does for free. And the last one, where a pawn reaches the end of the board and turning into a queen is the losing move. 1875, a game between Richard Fenton and William Potter, ends in a position nobody looked at twice. White king b6, pawn c6, black rook d5, black king in the corner on a1. The pawn runs, and the rook checks it the whole way down. Rook d6, king b5, rook d5, king b4, rook d4, king b3, rook d3, and the white king steps to c2, hitting the rook and threatening mate at once. Black finds the only move. Rook d4, offering itself. Because if white queens, the rook takes on c4 with check, white must recapture, and black has no legal move anywhere. Stalemate. That is where every analyst stopped for 20 years. Then a Spanish priest in Glasgow, Fernando Saavedra, looked again, and in May 1895, the Glasgow Weekly Citizen printed the move. Pawn to c8, and it becomes a rook. No check, no stalemate, and black is lost, because the threat is rook c1, mate in the corner, and the only defense loses the rook. He promoted to the second best piece on the board on purpose. Most famous move in endgame history.